The third note came home folded in my son's reading folder, between a worksheet about the letter R and a flyer for picture day, and it said, in his teacher's round handwriting, "So wonderful to see Caleb's dad in class again on Thursday. He's such a positive presence. The kids love him." I read it standing at the kitchen counter with my coat still on, and I read it twice, because Caleb does not have a dad who visits class. Caleb does not have a dad anyone has seen since he was 14 months old. And the address that teacher had on file, the address where the school sent everything, was a thing I had been careful about in a way most people never have to be careful about anything. The note by itself doesn't make sense without the 4 years in front of it. So, the 4 years. My name is Renee. I'm 34. My son is Caleb, and at the time of the notes he was 5, in kindergarten at an elementary school in a suburb north of Columbus, Ohio, a school I'm not going to name exactly, but I'll tell you it had a bright blue front door and a sign out front with movable letters that the office aide spelled wrong about half the time. "Welcome CAC students, one whole September." We live in an apartment off Cleveland Avenue, the second floor of a 4-unit building, and I work as a dental hygienist at a practice in Westerville, 4 days a week, with Fridays off, which matters later. Caleb's father is a man named Travis. I met him when I was 26, and he was charming in the way that took me about 2 years to understand was a tool and not a personality. We weren't married. He left when Caleb was 14 months old, which sounds clean, like he just walked out, and it wasn't clean. It took a year and a half and a lot of things I'm not going to lay out in detail because they're Caleb's to know someday and not the internet's. The short version is that by the time Caleb was 3, there was a protective order, and Travis was not supposed to have my address, and the court had a whole arrangement about supervised contact that Travis never once showed up for. He moved to Arizona. He sent nothing. The address I keep so carefully is not paranoia. It's a piece of paper a judge signed. So a note about Caleb's dad in class didn't read to me as a clerical mix-up. By the third note I was scared. The first one I almost threw away. The first note came home in late September, maybe 3 weeks into the school year. Caleb's teacher was a woman named Mrs. Dunbar, mid-50s, 20-some years at the school, the kind of teacher who sends a lot of notes home, little stickers, and great job stamps and updates about the class hamster, whose name was Pickle. The first note was short. It said, "Thank you to Caleb's father for the donation of books to our reading corner. So generous." I read it and my stomach did something, and then I talked myself down. I figured it was a form note, the kind they photocopy and send to the whole class, and somebody had checked the wrong box, and father was a generic placeholder, and the books had come from some other kid's dad. I almost didn't think about it again. I had a crown prep running long at work that whole week, and Caleb had an ear infection and I was getting maybe 5 hours of sleep. It was the word again that snagged. That was the second note. The second note came about 10 days after the first, early October, and it had the word that changed how I was reading all of this. It said, "Caleb's dad came in again today to help with our fall party setup." What a hands-on father. Again. Came in again. Helped with the party. I did some of it wrong, looking back. There was no plan. The first thing I did was ask Caleb. Carefully, because he's 5 and you can put ideas in a 5-year-old's head just by asking, and I didn't want to scare him or plant something. We were eating dinner, mac and cheese with the cut-up hot dogs he'll only eat if they're cut into coins and not sticks, and I said, "Easy, hey bug, "Did somebody's dad come help in your class today?" And Caleb said, "Yeah, the helper guy." I said, "The helper guy?" And Caleb said, "He helps. He brings the good markers." And I said, "Is the helper guy somebody's dad?" And Caleb shrugged the way 5-year-olds shrug, the whole body, and said, "Mrs. Dunbar says he's a dad." And then he wanted to tell me about Pickle the hamster escaping, and that was all I got. Because you can't interrogate a kindergartner, you just get fragments and hamster news. The good markers thing stuck with me. Caleb had mentioned a helper a couple of times earlier in September, and I hadn't thought anything of it, because schools have aides and volunteers and parent helpers all the time. I'd pictured a grandma. Most of the helpers when I was a kid were somebody's grandma. I emailed Mrs. Dunbar that night. I have the email. I went back and looked at it while I was getting this straight in my head. I kept it light, because I didn't want to sound unhinged over what could still be a mix-up. I wrote that I'd gotten her sweet notes, and that I wanted to clarify something, that Caleb's father is not involved in his life and doesn't have contact, and could she tell me who the gentleman helping in class actually was, because I thought there might be some confusion. I hit send around 9 at night, and then I didn't sleep great. Mrs. Dunbar wrote back the next afternoon, and her reply made it worse, not better, which I didn't expect. She wrote, warm as anything, that she completely understood family situations can be complicated, that she would be discreet, and that Mr. Acker has been such a wonderful support to Caleb and we're all so fond of him. Mr. Acker. She gave him a name. A last name that is not my last name and not Caleb's last name and not Travis's last name. My last name is Boyd. Caleb is Caleb Boyd. I had never heard the name Acker in my life. I read that email in the break room at work, on my phone, between patients, and a hygienist I work with named Stephanie asked if I was okay because I'd apparently said something out loud, and I said it was nothing, a school thing, and she said, "Oh, the joys," and went back to her yogurt, and I sat there with the name Acker on my screen and a 4:30 patient waiting and no idea what I was looking at. A dumb thing happened that same week. My car, a 2013 Corolla with 140,000 miles on it, started making a noise, a grinding when I braked, and I took it to a place on Schrock Road where the guy quoted me $400 for rear pads and rotors, and I didn't have $400 that week, so I drove around for 9 days with a brake noise that made me wince at every stop sign. I drove 9 days wincing at every stop sign while a strange man's name sat in my kid's school file. The brakes cost what they cost. The third note, the one I started with, came the following Thursday. So wonderful to see Caleb's dad in class again on Thursday. He's such a positive presence. The kids love him. That was the one I read twice with my coat on. By then I'd had the name Acker in my head for a week, and a strange man had apparently been in my son's classroom at least 3 times that I knew of, and the school thought he was Caleb's father, and nobody had asked me a single thing about it. I didn't email this time. I called the school office the next morning, on my Friday off, from my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I didn't drink. I got the office aide, a young woman who sounded harried, and I asked to speak to Mrs. Dunbar and was told she was teaching. Of course she was teaching, it was 9 in the morning. So I asked the aide a direct question instead. I asked her to look at Caleb Boyd's file and tell me who was listed as authorized for pickup and as emergency contacts. There was clicking. The aide read me the list. Me, obviously. My mother, who's in Dayton and on the list as a backup. And a third name. Gerald Acker, listed as grandfather, with a phone number I didn't recognize and a relationship to Caleb that does not exist, because both of Caleb's grandfathers are dead. My father died in 2011. Travis's father I never met, and Travis told me he'd passed before Caleb was born, though with Travis you never knew what was true. I asked the aide who had added Gerald Acker to the file. She didn't know. She said it had been there since the start of the year, that it would have come over in the registration paperwork, and did I want to talk to the office manager? I said yes. The office manager was in a meeting. They always are. I left my name and number, and the office manager did not call me back that day, which was a Friday, which meant the whole weekend sat in front of me with a strange man's name listed as my son's grandfather and a school that thought this was all perfectly in order. Before I called my mother, I did a couple of hours of looking on my own, because that's what you do at noon on a Friday when a stranger's name is sitting in your kid's school file. I searched Gerald Acker with Columbus and Ohio and got a man in his late 60s on a couple of those people finder sites, the ones that want $20 to show you anything, and I paid the $20 on one of them on my bad breaks budget, and got an address on the east side of Columbus, a list of past addresses going back to the 90s, and a couple of possible relatives, one of which was my mother's name spelled slightly wrong. So before my mother told me anything, I already half knew, because the internet had matched a 68-year-old Gerald Acker to my mother, and I sat with that for an hour before I could make the call. I didn't go into that call blind. I went in already scared, hoping she'd talk me out of it. I called my mother in Dayton that Friday afternoon, because she's the only family I have who'd know, and I asked her, straight out, did Travis have any family named Acker? Was there a grandfather, an uncle, anyone? My mother got quiet in a way that told me before her words did. She said, Renee, Acker was your grandmother's maiden name. My mother. Acker. And then she said the name I hadn't heard out loud since I was 19. She said, is it Gerald? Is it your Uncle Gerald? I had to sit down for that one. Not because I'd forgotten Gerald existed, but because I'd spent 15 years making sure Gerald didn't. Gerald is my mother's younger brother. My great-uncle, technically, to Caleb. I'm not going to lay out everything about Gerald either, for the same reason I won't lay out everything about Travis, because some of it belongs to people who didn't ask to be in a story. The short version is that Gerald was the reason my mother left her own family in her 20s, that there were things in that house she got herself and eventually me away from, and that the last time I saw Gerald I was 19, at my grandmother's funeral, where he showed up uninvited and my mother and I left through a side door of the funeral home to avoid him, past a table of those little mint candies in the cut glass dish, and I have not laid eyes on him since. He'd have been, doing the math, around 68 now. And his name was in my son's school file as grandfather, and he'd apparently been bringing the good markers to a kindergarten class for a month. My mother kept saying that can't be right, on the phone, and I let her say it, and I looked out my kitchen window at the parking lot where my Corolla sat with its bad brakes. And I tried to figure out how a man my mother and I had spent decades avoiding had ended up listed as family at a school whose address I'd guarded like the deed to my life. I did not sleep that weekend. Here's what I did with the hours. I pulled out Caleb's school registration paperwork, the copies I'd kept, because I keep copies of everything, a habit from the custody years where a missing document could cost you. I went through every page. The enrollment form I'd filled out in August had me as the parent, my mother as backup, and an emergency contact line I'd left for a neighbor named Dolores. There was no Gerald Acker anywhere in my paperwork. Whatever put him in that file, I hadn't done it. Monday morning I dropped Caleb at the Before Care program at 7:15, and then I sat in the school parking lot until the office opened at 8, and I went in, and I asked to see the office manager, a woman named Linda Pugh. And I did not leave a message this time. I sat in the little chairs by the trophy case until she could see me. The trophy case, while I waited, had a youth soccer trophy from 2009 and a science fair ribbon and a framed photo of a class from the 80s. And I read every label on every item 3 times because I was trying not to come out of my skin. Linda Pugh pulled up Caleb's file on her monitor and turned it a little so I could see, which I appreciated. And there it was. Gerald Acker, grandfather, with that phone number. I asked her where it came from. She clicked around and found what she called the intake source, and she frowned, and she said the contact had been added through the district's online parent portal, in September, by an account that had been verified against Caleb's record. Somebody had logged into a parent portal account tied to my son and added Gerald Acker as a grandfather. I told Linda Pugh, flat, that I had not done that I was the only parent, that the man listed was not a grandfather and not authorized and not supposed to be near my child, and that there was a protective order in this family. Though it was against Caleb's father and not, I had to admit, against Gerald, because Gerald had never been on anyone's legal radar. He'd just been a man my mother and I avoided. Linda's face changed when I said protective order. She stopped clicking. She said, "Okay. Okay, this is something we take seriously," and she picked up her phone and called someone, and within about 10 minutes I was in a different, quieter office with the assistant principal, a man named Mr. Reyes, and Linda, and the door closed. Mr. Reyes had to call the district's IT helpline to get some of it, and we sat on hold for 11 minutes with the speakerphone on, listening to hold music that was a tinny version of something I couldn't place, while Linda offered me a coffee from the staff pot that I took and didn't drink, and Mr. Reyes apologized twice for the wait, and a kindergartner came into the office in the middle of it having lost a tooth, holding it in a tiny plastic treasure chest, and the whole crisis paused while everyone admired the tooth and found the kid a tissue. Then IT picked up. Here's what they were able to piece together that morning, and it took all 3 of us and a lot of clicking. The district had rolled out a new online registration and parent portal system that summer, the kind of thing schools are always rolling out. And the system let a parent create an account and claim their student by entering the student's ID and date of birth and the family's address on file. Caleb's student ID was printed on every paper that came home, on the top of every worksheet, on the reading log, on the flyer for picture day. His date of birth is not a secret. And the address on file, my carefully guarded address, was the one piece I couldn't understand how Gerald had, until Mr. Reyes asked me a question that turned my stomach over. He asked if Caleb had been to any doctor, dentist, or activity in the last year where I'd filled out a form with our address and a family medical history. I had. Of course I had. You fill out that address 100 times a year. The pediatrician. The dentist, which is my own field, so that one stung. The soccer program through the rec center the spring before, the one where you list emergency contacts and family history. I'd written our address on a dozen forms at a dozen front desks, the way everyone does, the way you have to. Any one of them could have leaked it, and I was never going to know which one. Mr. Reyes did 3 things in that office while I sat there, and he did them fast, which is the only reason I didn't lose it. He removed Gerald Acker from Caleb's file right there, clicked through 2 screens and deleted the contact while I sat across the desk. He flagged the account that had added him, which the system showed had been created with an email address I didn't recognize, a Gmail with a string of numbers. And he called Mrs. Dunbar out of her class, had another teacher cover, and brought her into the office so I could hear, from her, exactly what had been happening in that room for a month. Mrs. Dunbar came in flustered, with a juice box stain on her cardigan, and when she understood what the meeting was about she went pale and sat down hard. She told it plainly, to her credit. A man had shown up at the classroom in the second week of school, during the morning drop-off window when parents are allowed to walk kids in, and he'd introduced himself as Caleb's grandfather, Gerald, and he'd been warm and grandfatherly and he'd known things. Caleb's name, Caleb's teacher's name, the classroom number, and he'd had a visitor sticker from the front office, which meant he'd signed in at the desk like visitors do, with the name in the system that matched, because by then he'd added himself to the system. He brought markers the first time, the good Crayola ones, $8 a pack, and the kids loved him, and he came back, and Mrs. Dunbar, who sees a lot of kids with no involved dad, was honestly delighted that Caleb had a grandfather stepping up, and she wrote me those notes thinking she was sharing good news. I asked Mrs. Dunbar if Gerald had ever been alone with Caleb. That was the only question I cared about in that room. Mrs. Dunbar said no, that he'd only ever been in the classroom during group activities with her and 20 other kids present, that he'd never picked Caleb up, never been with him one-on-one, and that the one time he'd asked about taking Caleb to grandparents' lunch, she'd told him that pickup and sign-out went through the office and required ID matching the authorized list. The sign-out list, the ID matching, the bureaucracy I'd rolled my eyes at, that was what kept Gerald from ever signing Caleb out. The same kind of system had let him in the front door. Both of those were true. The school put a flag on Caleb's file that afternoon, and no contact alert with Gerald Acker's name and a description, distributed to the office staff and the before and aftercare program. And Mr. Reyes walked me through filing a report with the district and with the local police non-emergency line, which I did from his office, while a secretary took Caleb out of his classroom and brought him to sit with me. And Caleb thought he was in trouble and I had to spend the first 5 minutes convincing him he wasn't, that he'd done nothing wrong, that mommy just had to talk to the school about grown-up scheduling stuff. Which is the phrase I landed on and which he accepted because 5-year-olds accept grown-up scheduling stuff the way they accept weather. I took the rest of that day off, the first time I'd called out of work in 2 years that wasn't for Caleb being sick, and the office at the dental practice was annoyed because I had a full schedule, and Stephanie texted me a row of question marks, and I texted back family thing and turned my phone over. Caleb and I went to a Wendy's on the way home because I didn't have it in me to cook, and he got a kid's meal and was thrilled because we never do that on a weekday. And he ate 3 chicken nuggets and played with the toy and asked if the helper guy was going to come back to class, and I said no, baby, the helper guy isn't going to come anymore. And Caleb said okay and went back to the toy, and that was the entire weight it carried for him, which I was grateful for and which also made me want to cry into my Frosty. The police report led to a detective, a woman named Officer Brandt, who called me 2 days later, and the conversation with her was where I started to understand what Gerald actually was after, which was stranger and sadder than the thing I'd been bracing for. I'd spent 2 days bracing for the worst kind of explanation, the kind you read about, and I'm not going to put those fears into words here because they're the obvious ones and because they turned out to be wrong, and I don't want to leave them hanging in the air over a 5-year-old. Officer Brandt was direct with me. She'd run Gerald Acker. He had a record, but it was old, decades old, and it wasn't the category I'd feared. What he had, more than a record, was a pattern the family already knew about, which Officer Brandt drew out of me by asking the right questions. Gerald had spent his whole life inserting himself into families that had cut him off. My grandmother's funeral, a cousin's wedding he wasn't invited to, and now this. He'd found out, somehow, that his niece had a son, and he'd decided he was a grandfather, and he'd built himself the role through a school portal and a pack of markers. My mother filled in the rest over a long phone call that weekend, more than she'd ever told me, because now she had to. She started with my grandmother, her mother, the actor my grandmother had been before she married, because I'd never really known that side, and now the name was in my son's file. My grandmother grew up on a farm outside Lancaster, Ohio, one of 5 kids, and Gerald was the youngest and the one she'd always made excuses for, my mother said. My grandmother kept letting Gerald back in, all her life, after every wife and every falling out, because he was the baby and she couldn't not. My mother said the holidays of her own childhood were organized around whether Gerald was in a good stretch or a bad one, whether he'd be at Thanksgiving or banned from it that year, and that she'd left home at 19 partly to stop living by that calendar. My grandmother died in 2009. And the funeral was the last time the whole family was in a room, and Gerald showed up to that, the way he showed up to everything, and my mother and I left through the side door past the mint candies, which I told you about. Gerald had no kids of his own. He'd been married twice and both wives had left and taken whatever family there was with them. My grandmother, his and my mother's mother, had been the last person who'd let him near. And when she died in 2009, the door closed, and my mother had spent the years since keeping it closed. Gerald had tried before, my mother admitted. A Christmas card to her house in Dayton 4 years ago that she'd thrown out without telling me. A friend request to her on Facebook under a slightly different name. She'd handled those quietly so I wouldn't worry, which I understood and was also angry about, because if I'd known Gerald was circling, I might have understood the actor name 3 notes sooner. How he found the school specifically, Officer Brandt thought, came down to public soccer rosters and a rec center program that listed kids by name and town, plus Caleb's last name being mine, Boyd, which is searchable, plus the address leaking from one of those front desk forms. Gerald had done the work. He'd built a profile of a great-nephew he'd never met, claimed him through a portal designed for busy parents, and walked into a kindergarten with $8 markers, and a tired warm-hearted teacher had written me notes about it thinking she was making my week. Officer Brandt said one thing that gave me solid ground. He didn't break a window. He filled out a form. That's harder to stop and easier to undo than you'd think. Then she told me exactly what to do, the order to do it in, and I did it. In the middle of all this, my downstairs neighbor Dolores, the one I'd listed as an emergency contact, had a thing happen that I got pulled into. Her adult son, who she'd been fighting with, showed up drunk one night and there was yelling in the stairwell at 11 p.m., and I stood at my door in a t-shirt deciding whether to call someone, while Caleb slept through all of it, and it turned out to be nothing. The son left. Dolores cried in my kitchen for an hour and ate most of a sleeve of Thin Mints, and I sat with her because that's what you do, and the whole time some back part of my brain was still chewing on Gerald and the portal and the markers. Dolores's son was just Dolores's son. That was the week, a Gerald problem and a Dolores's son problem and a break problem, all in the same 7 days. The school and I talked almost daily for a week, the boring follow-up nobody pictures. Linda Pugh, the office manager, called me Tuesday to confirm the no-contact flag had gone out to the before-care and after-care staff, and she read me the names of every adult who supervised Caleb on a given day so I'd know who'd been told, which I hadn't asked for and which I was grateful for. The before care lady, a woman named Miss Joan who Caleb loves, called me herself, on her own time, to tell me she had a description and that she wasn't going to let anybody through, and she said it with a flintiness that made me believe her completely. The aftercare program was run out of the cafeteria by the YMCA, and that was a separate phone tree, a separate set of people to loop in, and it took me 3 calls to get the right coordinator, a man named Deshawn, who was thorough and apologetic that it had taken 3 calls, and who added the flag to their sign-out binder while I was on the phone with him. I also had to tell the bus situation, except Caleb didn't ride the bus, I drove him, so that was one fewer thing, and I remember being absurdly grateful for the one fewer thing. For the small mercy of a kid who gets driven to school by his mom in a Corolla with new brakes. In the middle of the school week from hell, Caleb had a dentist appointment, his own, at the practice where I work, which is its own kind of strange, getting your kid's teeth cleaned by your coworker. My coworker, a hygienist named Bao, did Caleb's cleaning and gave him the little prize from the prize drawer, a bouncy ball. And Caleb dropped the bouncy ball in the parking lot and it went under a parked truck, and we spent 10 minutes with me on my stomach on the asphalt in my work scrubs trying to reach a 99-cent bouncy ball with a windshield scraper while Caleb cried. And we did not get the ball, and I bought him a new one from a vending machine inside that was worse, and he was fine in 4 minutes, and that was a Wednesday in the worst month. A grown woman under a truck for a bouncy ball. Officer Brandt's order of operations was simple, and I followed it like a recipe. Document everything. Get the school's records of every visit. Get a lawyer about extending protection to cover Gerald. Don't contact him. I already had the notes, all 3, in Mrs. Dunbar's round handwriting, and I'd kept the envelopes and the dates. The school gave me the visitor sign-in logs, which showed Gerald Acker signing in on 4 mornings in September and October, with times, the latest at 8:42 a.m. on a Thursday, the Thursday from the 3rd note. They gave me a printout of the portal account that had added him, the Gmail with the numbers, the IP information that the district's tech person pulled, which Officer Brandt said could matter later. I put all of it in a folder, a physical green folder, because I'm a paper person from the custody years, and then I scanned all of it into a folder on my computer too, because Officer Brandt said keep a copy somewhere that isn't your apartment. The lawyer was a woman named Priya Chandrasekharan, who did family law in a strip mall office between a vape shop and a Great Clips, and who I could afford because she did the first consult free and then worked out a payment plan with me when she heard the situation. $200 a month, which I'm still paying and don't resent. Priya looked at my existing protective order, the one against Travis, and explained that it didn't cover Gerald, because Gerald wasn't named in it and had no history with me legally. He was just a man my family avoided. But what he'd done, she said, the portal, the false grandfather claim, the repeated unauthorized presence around a child after the school made clear the access rules, gave us grounds to seek a new civil protection order naming Gerald specifically, and to ask the school to be a documented party to the no-contact arrangement. We filed in November. The filing itself was a morning at the Franklin County Courthouse, a metal detector where I had to take off my belt and the deputy made small talk about the weather. A clerk's window where I waited behind a man contesting a parking situation who would not let it go, and a filing fee Priya had me bring as a money order because they didn't take cards at that window. I'd learned that at a different window during the custody years. I had Caleb at before care that morning and a substitute covering my first 2 patients at work, which I'd had to beg for, and the whole thing took 3 hours for what amounted to handing a folder through a window. The hearing was 2 weeks later, and it terrified me, because a hearing meant Gerald might be there, and he was. I saw him for the first time in 15 years across a courthouse hallway in Columbus, and he looked smaller than I remembered and older, in a brown jacket, holding a folder of his own. And he tried to catch my eye, and I looked at the wall behind him, and Priya stepped between us without making a show of it. There was a vending machine in that hallway that was out of order with a handwritten sign, and a young couple 2 benches down going through what was clearly a custody thing of their own. The woman crying quietly and the man staring at his phone. And I remember thinking that the whole hallway was full of people having the worst day of some year of their lives, and a broken vending machine presiding over all of it. He'd brought no lawyer. He represented himself, and when the magistrate asked him to explain his contact with a minor he wasn't authorized to see, Gerald said the thing that told me he genuinely did not understand what he'd done wrong, or had decided not to. He said he was just trying to be family, that he had a right to know his own blood, that he'd never laid a hand on the boy, never been alone with him, anyone can check. Which was true, and which was also not the point, and the magistrate told him it wasn't the point, in plainer words than I could have managed. The order went through. A civil protection order, naming Gerald Acker, prohibiting contact with me and with Caleb, and prohibiting him from coming within a set distance of the school, the apartment, and Caleb's activities. The school was looped informally. Gerald's portal account was killed, and the district tightened the claiming process that same semester, which his secretary told me later wasn't only because of us. There'd been a second case in another building, a non-custodial parent doing something similar. So it wasn't only us. There'd been a second family at another building. Gerald said one thing to me as the hearing broke up, across the hallway, before a bailiff moved him along. He said, "I just wanted to know him. Not sorry. Not an explanation. Just that, I just wanted to know him," in a voice that had something real under it, and I didn't answer. Because there was nothing I could say that the order didn't already say for me, and because Priya had told me not to, and because Caleb was at before care and I wanted to get back to him. What happened after the order wasn't dramatic, which I've come to understand is how most of these things actually go. A lot of paperwork and phone calls, and then a slow return to ordinary that you don't trust at first. Mrs. Dunbar asked to meet with me, just the 2 of us, a week after the hearing, and I almost said no because some part of me blamed her, the notes, the warmth, the letting him in. She came to the meeting with a card she'd made and a genuine apology, and she cried, and she told me she'd been doing this 23 years and had never once had something like this, that the visitor system had never failed her before, that she felt sick about the notes she'd sent thinking they were good news. I didn't fully forgive her in that meeting, because I wasn't ready to, but I told her I understood she'd been fooled the same as the system had, and that Caleb adored her, which was true, and that mattered more to me than my own anger at the situation. She moved Caleb's seat to the front near her desk for the rest of the year, which she didn't have to do and which I noticed. Caleb, for his part, asked about the helper guy maybe twice more and then stopped, the way kids let go of things, and the markers Gerald had brought stayed in the classroom because there was no reason to throw out perfectly good markers, and Caleb used them all year without any idea where they'd come from, and I decided that was fine, that a 5-year-old didn't need to carry the story of the markers, that the markers could just be markers. He's 6 now and doesn't remember any of it, and I'm not going to be the one to remind him until he's old enough to need the whole thing, the Travis parts and the Gerald parts both, which is a conversation for a much older Caleb and a much older me. My mother and I got closer through it, and also there's a new thing between us that's harder, because I found out she'd been hiding Gerald's earlier attempts to protect me, and I understood why, and I was still angry. And we had a couple of real fights about it over the phone that fall, the kind we'd never had, my mother and I, who mostly kept things smooth. She drove up from Dayton for Caleb's birthday in December and stayed the weekend, and we didn't talk about Gerald at all, on purpose. And she taught Caleb how to make the specific kind of sugar cookies her own mother used to make. The ones with the colored sugar on top, and watching the two of them do that in my small kitchen, flour everywhere, was the first time since September I'd felt the thing in my chest unclench. I changed some things after, practical things, because Officer Brandt and Priya both told me to, and because I wanted to. I put a freeze on the kind of records that can be pulled. I started using a P.O. box for anything that wasn't strictly necessary, and I went through Caleb's activities and asked every front desk, the pediatrician, the dentist, the rec center, to flag our file as confidential. And most of them had a way to do that, and a couple looked at me like I was paranoid, and I let them look. I'm the one who reads the notes that come home. I read all of them now, every flyer, every worksheet, every folded thing in the reading folder, all the way through, which I did not used to do, because before September a note from school was just a note from school. There was an afternoon in January, totally unrelated, where I locked my keys in the Corolla, the same Corolla, now with new brakes finally, in the Kroger parking lot with a cart of groceries and Caleb in his snow boots, and a stranger, a woman about my mother's age, waited with us in the cold for 45 minutes until the locksmith came, and bought Caleb a hot chocolate from the Starbucks inside, and we never exchanged last names, and I think about her more than I think about Gerald. Honestly, a stranger who just stayed in the cold with a frazzled mom for no reason. The years before the notes. I skated past them. The custody years with Travis ran from when Caleb was about 1 until he was 3, and they were the worst 2 years of my life, and I'm only going to give you the shape of them. There were court dates I took unpaid time off for, 14 of them over 2 years, I counted once. There was a guardian ad litem named Mr. Foss who smelled like cigarettes and kept calling Caleb the child, and once called him by the wrong name in a hearing, called him Cody, and I corrected him and he didn't apologize. There was a stretch where Travis fought for 50-50 and then, the week it might actually have happened, stopped showing up to anything, missed 3 supervised visits in a row at a center on the east side where you sit in a room with cameras. And just like that he was in Arizona and the fight was over and I'd spent $11,000 I didn't have on a lawyer to win something Travis decided he didn't want anyway. The address became sacred in those years, because there was a period where Travis would show up places, the old apartment, my work parking lot once, and the protective order came out of a specific incident I'm not going to detail. And after that the address moved with us to the place off Cleveland Avenue, and I never put it anywhere I didn't have to. I'd lived 4 years feeling like I'd finally sealed the thing shut. And then a man I'd never even been guarding against, because all my guarding pointed at Travis, walked in through a parent portal with my own kid's student ID, which gets printed on a worksheet about the letter R. I called Travis, actually, during all of this, which I hadn't done in years and which Priya advised against, and I did anyway, because I had to know if he was connected to Gerald, if this was a Travis play using my family against me. I still had a number for him. It rang and a woman answered, and I asked for Travis, and she said he wasn't available. And who was this? And I said I was Caleb's mother and I needed to ask him one question, and there was a muffled conversation, and then Travis got on. And he sounded older and tired and a little drunk for 2 in the afternoon. He had no idea who Gerald Acker was. I could tell within 10 seconds he wasn't faking, because Travis was never a good enough actor to fake confusion. His confusion was the most honest thing about him. He asked how Caleb was. I said fine. He said tell him, and then didn't finish the sentence, and I said I had to go, and that was the whole conversation, the first and last time Caleb's father and I had spoken since a courtroom 3 years earlier, and it had nothing in it, no resolution, no apology, just a tired man in Arizona who didn't know anything and a tell him that went nowhere. I felt strange after that call, not sad exactly, just hollow in a specific spot, and I did a dumb thing to shake it. I took Caleb to the indoor trampoline place out by Polaris that costs way too much, $22 for an hour of jumping. And I jumped with him even though the sign said adults should consult a physician, and I pulled something in my lower back that bothered me for a week, and Caleb laughed at me falling down so hard he got the hiccups, and it was worth the $22 and the back thing, both. One detail I can't make mean anything. When the school pulled the visitor logs, the first time Gerald signed in the second week of September, he listed his reason for visiting in the little box as reading helper. Not grandfather, not family, on that first log, just reading helper. Somewhere between that first morning and the notes, he'd promoted himself to dad in the school's understanding, and I never found out exactly how. Whether he said it or whether Mrs. Dunbar assumed it from the grandfather thing and the warmth and just ran with the wrong word. The note said dad. The file said grandfather. The first sign-in said reading helper. 3 versions of the same man on 3 pieces of paper, all in the green folder. Dad, grandfather, reading helper. The second case, the one the secretary mentioned, the other family at another building, stuck with me, so I asked Priya about it, and she knew a little because the district had quietly brought in a consultant about the portal after both incidents came up the same fall. The other one was different from mine in the details and the same in the shape. A non-custodial father, fully a real parent, just one a court had restricted, had used the same claiming process to add himself to his kid's file at a school across the district and had started showing up. Different man, different family, same crack in the same new system. The district had rolled the portal out in July with a setup that verified you against 3 pieces of information that were all, it turned out, printed on papers that go home in a backpack, the student ID and the birth date and the address. Priya said the consultant's recommendation was that adding a new guardian or emergency contact should require a step the school does in person or by a phone call to the existing parent, and that the district adopted some version of that by spring. I don't know if that's true everywhere now. I know it's true at Caleb's school, because they called me, in March, to verify a contact I actually was adding, my mother's new cell number. And the call annoyed me for about 4 seconds before I remembered why it existed, and then I thanked the woman more than the situation called for. I went to a parent thing at the school that spring, a curriculum night, and I almost didn't go because the building still had a charge for me, but Caleb wanted to show me his cubby and the reading corner, the one Gerald's donated books had gone into, which I'd forgotten about until I was standing in front of it. The books were still there, a dozen of them, picture books, and one of them had a little sticker inside the front cover that the office puts on donated books, and I opened one and it said donated by the Acker family, in that office aide handwriting, the same aide who spelled the marquee wrong, and I stood there in a kindergarten reading corner holding a book that said donated by the Acker family, and I had a whole quiet minute about it while parents milled around me looking at art projects. I didn't make a scene. I put the book back. I thought about asking them to take the sticker out and decided it wasn't worth being the mom who made a thing of it at curriculum night, and the books are good books, and Caleb's class reads them, and a sticker is a sticker. That same curriculum night, totally separately, a dad I'd never met cornered me by the snack table to complain for 15 minutes about the school's new math curriculum, the way they teach subtraction now, And I nodded and ate 3 of the grocery store cookies and could not get away from him. And his name was, I think, Greg. And he had strong feelings about number lines, a man named Greg, and the tragedy of modern subtraction, 4 feet from the reading corner. The same night, Stephanie at work, the yogurt one, found out the broad strokes eventually, because I'd called out and been weird for a few weeks, and she's not dumb. And one slow afternoon between patients I told her a compressed version. And she was quiet, and then she said her cousin had gone through something with a parent portal too, a custody thing. And that these systems were a disaster for families like ours. And I didn't know Stephanie was a family like ours until that sentence. And we talked for 10 minutes in the sterilization room about things neither of us had told anyone at work. And then a patient showed up for a cleaning, and we both put our scrubs faces back on, and that was that. Gerald violated the order once, that I know of, about 4 months after it was granted. It wasn't at the school, and it wasn't near Caleb. He mailed a card to my apartment, my actual apartment, which told me he still had the address and always would. You can't unleak an address. And the card was a birthday card for Caleb, 2 months off from Caleb's actual birthday, with a $20 bill in it and a note in shaky handwriting that said, "For my great-nephew, from Uncle Gerald." Sending it was a violation of the order, the no-contact part, and I gave the card to Priya, and Priya reported it, and there was a process, and Gerald got a warning from a judge and, I was told, was verbally quite upset in court that a birthday card could be a crime, because he still, for months and a whole legal proceeding later, did not understand or would not understand the thing he'd done. I kept the $20 in a drawer for a while, not knowing what to do with a tainted 20, and eventually I put it in the donation box at Caleb's school for the Families in Need Fund at the holidays, which felt like the right place for it. Money from a man who wanted to be family going to actual families who needed something. And I didn't tell anyone I did that. It just made the 20 stop bothering me. Gerald's in his late 60s, and I don't know what his life is, and I've made a point of not finding out, because the one time I let myself look him up online, late at night, I found an obituary for his second wife from years back and a single photo of him at some community event from a local paper. And I closed the laptop and felt bad in a way that helped nobody, and I haven't looked since. My mother says he's alone. She says it with a complicated voice, because he's her brother and she got herself away from him, and both of those are true and neither cancels the other. She doesn't defend him. She also doesn't celebrate any of it. When the order came through, she said good on the phone, just good, flat, and then changed the subject to whether Caleb needed new snow pants, and I understood that good was carrying about 50 years of things I'll never fully know. Caleb's reading corner books, the Acker family ones, are still in that classroom as far as I know, being read by next year's kindergartners who'll never know a thing about any of it, and that's fine with me. That's how it should be. The books outliving whatever was attached to them. Caleb's a confident reader now, 6 years old, reads me the cereal box in the morning and the signs we pass in the car. And he doesn't know that the question of who was reading with him in September ever cost his mother a minute of sleep. And I'd like to keep it that way as long as I honestly can. It took me a while to stop checking the file, is the honest thing. For months after the order, I'd log into the parent portal once a week, on my Friday off, with my coffee, and I'd read down the list of authorized contacts on Caleb's account, me, my mother, Dolores, and I'd confirm there was no fourth name, and then I'd log out. I knew it was a little compulsive. I did it anyway, into the spring, and then one Friday I realized I hadn't done it in 3 weeks, and I'd just forgotten, the way you forget a worry once it's actually gone, and I didn't go check that day either, on purpose, as a kind of test, and the world didn't end. Caleb turned 6 in December and we had the party at one of those jump places, the same chain as the trampoline afternoon. And 11 kids came and 2 parents I barely knew stayed the whole time, and one mom brought a gift that was the exact toy we'd already gotten him, and Caleb didn't care. He was thrilled to have 2. My mother drove up. Dolores from downstairs came and brought a card with another 20 in it, an untainted 20 this time, which Caleb pushed into his piggy bank with his thumb, and I thought about the other 20, the Gerald 20, sitting in a school donation box. And then a kid threw up from too much pizza and the thought got swept away by paper towels, which is about right. I ran into Mrs. Dunbar at a grocery store in the spring, the Giant Eagle on Maxtown Road, both of us in the cereal aisle on a Saturday, out of context the way teachers always are out of context, and we talked for a minute, awkward and warm at the same time. And she asked how Caleb was reading and I told her great, and she got a little teary in the cereal aisle and said he was one of her favorites, and then apologized for getting emotional by the Cheerios, and we both laughed. And her card had a rotisserie chicken and a bag of those mint candies in it, the same kind from the funeral home 15 years ago, which meant nothing, they're a common candy, and I noticed it anyway and didn't say anything. One more thing, from this past fall, a year after all of it. Caleb's school sent home a sign-up for parent reading volunteers, the same role Gerald had written in that first sign-in box, reading helper, and I signed up. I take my Friday off, the one I've always had, and I go in and I read with Caleb's class, with Mrs. Dunbar still there, in the same reading corner with the same donated books. And the kids call me Caleb's mom, and Caleb gets shy and proud at the same time when I'm there. And I sit in the little chair that's too small for me and read picture books to 20 kindergartners on the floor. And I'm the reading helper now. And nobody had to fill out a form pretending to be anyone to make that true.
If this story resonated with you, you can subscribe for more.